Hello, and thank you for joining our latest EuroCham webinar on consumption and social behaviour during COVID-19. This is the latest in our webinar series where we aim to tackle issues relevant to the COVID-19 pandemic. For a long time, the opportunities presented by Cambodia's rising consumer class and young population have been extremely attractive to both local and foreign investors. And in previous webinars, such as our FMCG webinar in 2019, we certainly saw that Cambodia's growing economy will continue to present opportunities for investors. However, the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic has derailed the sales forecasts of almost all companies selling consumer goods, at least for 2020. So for today's webinar, we will take a slightly different format from those previous, and our speaker from Indochina Research will be sharing the latest data that they have collected on exactly how consumer trends have changed during the COVID-19 pandemic. So there is very little primary data out there at the moment on this topic, especially for Cambodia. And so personally, I'm very interested in seeing what has been collected and grateful to our speaker today for sharing their study with us and with the audience. So for all those listening, this webinar is organized by EuroCham as part of the ICI Plus SEBSEEM program, support for European businesses in Southeast Asian markets, which has been generously co-funded by the European Union delegation to Cambodia. The overall objective of this program is to promote Cambodia and ASEAN as a high potential trade and investment destination for EU companies, as well as to strengthen the EU business sector in Cambodia by facilitating market access through advocacy with the Cambodian government. So I would just like to extend our thanks to the EU delegation in Cambodia, as well as to our 2020 sponsors you can see here, without whose support this event wouldn't be possible. So today's webinar will have a two-part structure and it will last around 1 hour. So I will be the moderator today. First, we'll just have a brief introduction to the format of the webinar. And then Mr. Francis Palomares of Indochina Research will share his study findings. Finally, we'll end with a live Q&A session where audience members can post their questions. So for the format, if you have a question at any point, please type it in your chat window on the bottom right hand of your screen. We will either address it during the flow of the presentation or it will be addressed in the Q&A at the end. So one thing I'd say is we recognize that the slides today are quite data heavy. This is the presentation of a research study. And so to address an audience question ahead of time, the slides will be available and they'll be posted on our EuroCham YouTube link along with the recorded webinar. So you will have the slides. For anyone registered today, you will also be sent a personal email with the link once the YouTube video is ready. To introduce myself briefly, my name is Tom Hesketh and I'm the Business Services Manager at EuroCham Cambodia. As part of the ICI Plus SEBSEEM grant, my role is to support organizations learn more about the Cambodian market through advisory and support services. And today, I have the pleasure of being joined by an expert in the field of market research, Mr. Francis Palomares of Indochina Research. So, Francis, I wonder if you could say a few words just to introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Francis Palomares Jr. So I'm the General Manager of Indochina Research. I've been in Cambodia for almost 4 years right now.
So 4 years, and in that time as the General Manager of Indochina Research. If interested in today's topic, one thing I would say is if you want to understand how the situation has maybe changed compared to 2019, you can also find our previous FMCG webinar on our YouTube channel, where we looked at business opportunities in the fast-moving consumer goods sector. Just before we move on to the main content, for any members on the call, EuroCham is planning on holding its AGM on the 9th of September. I'd encourage any members here today to join. That will be one of the first major physical events that EuroCham will be holding since the COVID-19 pandemic, so we're excited to see that one happen. And at the same time, EuroCham will continue to publish and translate government announcements related to COVID-19 in English to all of our members. So the latest of these will be available in our August newsletter later this week. So with that, I'll now pass the floor to Mr. Francis Palomares to share his study findings. And so Francis, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Tom, for that one. Okay, so this is the study that we're going to have today will be a hotspot survey done by EuroCham Research Cambodia, and we talk about the lifestyle study during COVID-19. So as a presentation flow, so we have three parts. We'll have the research overview, the key findings, as well as the learnings and applications to wrap it up. So I'll just go to the brief background. So we know this is a time lapse of COVID-19 in Cambodia. So we know we have around 200 cases here in the country, confirmed cases, and we have like around 82% who are recovered from COVID-19. COVID-19 in Cambodia started in January in Sihanoukville, an imported case. And then the fear in COVID-19 for COVID-19 Cambodia reached its peak during March, wherein there were closures of schools, establishments, as well as the borders between Thailand and Vietnam. And then we have in April there was no Khmer New Year because of the cross-provincial travel ban. And then in May there was a slow resumption of economic activities. And then in June and July up to today, we have like imported cases, which is I think we had around 241 as of today. Okay. So just for the research objectives or for the research overview, our research is a self-funded study by EuroCham Research Cambodia. And in terms of the research objectives, we just want to find out two things. One is how does the pandemic change the consumption habits and the social behavior of Phnom Penh residents. And the other one is that which product categories are winning and losing in terms of consumption behavior on penetration, as well as frequency of purchase with this pandemic. So in terms of the research design, so we did a quantitative lifestyle study using IRL Blast, which is the online research methodology of EuroCham Research, which we introduced in March. And we did the study with a structured questionnaire in Khmer using Qualtrics as a data collection software. And we sent out the survey through SMS to the respondents using the IRL panel, which is the online managed panel in EuroCham Research, as well as the mobile phone database of the 3 mobile phone service providers here in Cambodia, as well as in Facebook. So we talked to males and females 16 to 65 years old who are smartphone users. And since this is an online research, so we have to do some data weights on the information because the respondents were skewed towards the younger population as well as the upper income class because we did an online survey. So we came up with data weights to make the results of this study more generalizable to the sentiments of the Phnom Penh residents. And then for this study, we also have 2 waves. The first wave was done in April. That was like during the peak of the fear on COVID-19. And the second wave was done in June. And in terms of the sample size, we have like around 200 plus respondents in each of the wave. So for a reference period, when we asked the questions to the respondents, so in wave 1, that was done in April, we had made the respondents think about their perception changes between February and March, because March was the peak of the COVID-19 cases here in Cambodia. In wave 2, what we have done is that we have let the respondents think about their behavior from the change from May vis-a-vis March. So March was like the baseline information of the behavior of the Phnom Penh residents in this study. And then in terms of how to read or interpret the information that we're going to have in this report, so if you're going to see a green arrow, that means that number is significantly better compared to the wave 1 or to the March data. If you see a red arrow, that means that it's significantly lower or decreasing from wave 2 to wave 1. And then just a data caveat, if you see a sample size or respondent base of less than 30, it's not statistically readable. So let's just take the data as it is, no? But with caution. So it's not really generalizable to the population of the Phnom Penh residents because it's less than 30 sample size, which is not statistically stable. Okay, so let's go to the key findings of the research. So we'll tap into the COVID-19 attitudes and behavior first. So the first question that we asked the respondents is that how worried are they towards COVID-19? So on the left side, you have a graph in there wherein it shows that during March or during wave 1, we had around 91% of people who are very worried with COVID-19. And in wave 2, it is down to 78%. So that means that the residents of Phnom Penh are significantly less worried with COVID-19 in the recent survey that we have. And this is more seen amongst the males, the older population, as well as the upper income class. So that means that the working class, those who went back to work starting in May, they're less worried towards COVID-19. And then we also asked them, how is their health in terms of physical, mental, as well as emotional, just to find out their attitudes or their health condition during COVID-19. Again, there's a positive note or positive change on that one in wave 2, wherein people are, since they're less worried, so their mental health as well as the emotional well-being are much better in wave 2 as compared to wave 1. And then we asked them, where did they hear or see any news about COVID-19? You can just take a look at the total column. I know this is a busy chart, just to help the audience on this one. So in wave 1, which is the second column, there were a variety of sources of information, just like the online and social media, the government, as well as the word of mouth, to some extent traditional media also. But in wave 2, there is a massive shift in the sense that people are going into the more trustworthy sources of information, just like the government and NGO, and to some extent newspaper. So there is less number of people who are looking into Facebook as well as YouTube as a source of COVID-19 information. And again, it has something to do with people having less time on the internet usage during this time because people are going to work already. And then we asked people about also the physical or social distancing, whether they are aware. The Phnom Penh residents are aware of physical distancing much more in wave 2. It's like around 95% already, or 92% are aware of physical distancing. Then we asked them, are they practicing social distancing personally? So they are aware earlier, but unfortunately, they are not practicing social distancing all the time. Only 37% of people are practicing social distancing personally. And then we also asked them whether the other people who they were talking with also practice physical distancing. And they claim that only 2 out of 5 other people are also practicing social distancing. And then the other question that we asked about social distancing is that whether it's effective or not in terms of reducing or mitigating COVID-19. And only a third of people are actually saying that social distancing is a very effective tool to control COVID-19. And the primary reason possibly of that one would be because the Phnom Penh residents are doing something else in terms of controlling COVID-19 for them, no? Just like they are sanitizing their hands, they are staying inside their house, they are canceling large gatherings, they are observing their health status more seriously, as well as they stop shaking hands with other people, and they have less number of people are visiting their friends and family members from the provinces, and then they're keeping themselves updated with the current events. So these things that they are doing are for them are more useful or more effective in terms of preventing COVID-19, not so much on social distancing.
So that's quite a potentially worrying statistic that only 30% of people thought that social distancing was an effective way of controlling COVID-19. I mean, I can see it even in Phnom Penh with bars reopening, for example. So did you think that in your survey, did any of the respondents give reasons for why they didn't think social distancing was useful?
That's a good question, Tom. No, this one we did a quantitative research. We didn't ask the reasons why they're not doing social distancing, but we can infer that, I guess, Cambodians typically are not social butterflies, if I may say so. They do not see themselves to be in a group of people, except on the long holidays here in Cambodia, wherein people go to the provinces to meet with their parents or with their family members. But outside of it, people are actually just going outside to eat with their friends and family members. But what we are seeing here is that they're not seeing social distancing as a preventive tool, not as effective as a physical ways that they're doing in terms of controlling COVID-19.
I see. Okay.
All right. So that's the end of the section with regards to the COVID-19 attitudes as well as behavior. Now we're going to the second information set, where we're going to talk about the changes on the consumption behavior. Okay, so we have this purchase power index, or PPI, of 32 nominated categories by us, by Untitled Research. And these 32 product categories, we just thought of it. So we did that. We have made it in such a way that it's as wide as possible in terms of the different categories that are present, product categories that are present here in Cambodia. And there are two information that we have put across in this set. One is the incidence of purchase of each product, and the other one is the purchase frequency perception, whether they have bought more or less or buy the same from February vis-a-vis March for wave 1 and May versus March in wave 2. So what we have done is that to have a ranking of the gainers and the losers of the product categories in terms of purchase power, we have made indices on the purchase incidence as well as the purchase frequency perception, and then we combine them to come up with a one number score for each of the category. So in the next slides, we're going to have information on which product categories have gained more and which product categories have gained less in terms of purchase power. So we have in this slide, the ones in green are those product categories which were bought more. They have an increasing purchase power from wave 1 to wave 2. And then the ones in the red columns are the product categories that are being purchased less from wave 1 to wave 2. And there are two things that I would say in this slide. I'll talk about the product categories that have increasing purchase power. And this is understandable because of COVID-19. people are buying more of the alcohol gel, face mask, those three products that are personal protection of COVID-19. And on the other side, the declining purchase power, because of the Kamay New Year was celebrated in April. So people were buying less of the alcoholic drinks, i.e. the beer as well as the wines and other liquors. Cigarettes to some extent also was affected, but not as much during wave 2. But then again, there are two things though. One is that the COVID-19 personal protection products are gaining a lot, and the alcoholic drinks are the ones which are being affected negatively by COVID-19.
Yeah, I see another interesting one there is the drop in electronic gadgets, which I suppose makes sense during COVID-19. If people have slightly less income, they're less likely to buy their new iPhone or something. So your research suggested this?
Yeah, that's true, Tom. The other reason also outside of income, I think it's more on whether people are able to get out from their houses also, because they have to buy electronic gadgets through the physical stores. Well, we see now later on about an increasing number of people who are going online, but I think Cambodians are not yet ready to purchase big ticket items online. No, they are okay to buy the small amount of monies that they can shell out through online means. Right. This one would be the purchase power index of the different product categories which are bought more. And this is a ranking of the different categories. You'll see on the upper part of the slide wherein if you see a negative number, so that means that these products were bought less in wave 2 of the research, while those categories that have positive number, that means that they're able to recover or they're able to have more purchases in wave 2. So the product categories that have more purchasing power in wave 2 would include the bottled water, the vitamins, to some extent rice, as well as the medicine for colds. On the flip side, those products that have lesser purchasing power in wave 2, that includes the alcohol, the canned products, the healthy foods, as well as the tissues. Now, I think the reason why the alcohol and the alcohol purchases becomes less in wave 2 is because people are not as worried as in wave 1.
Mm.
So I think that makes sense in terms of the slight behavior shift in wave 2.
And I guess these are quite interesting because I suppose if there is a second wave of COVID-19, you would expect these figures to reverse again.
Yes, that's true also. No? Because we may expect more people to purchase those personal COVID-19 protection products. And then this is the second set of the different product categories. Again, those products that are being bought more in wave 2 would include the infant milk formula, the baby foods, the bread, as well as electronic gadgets. And then the products that are less purchased in wave 2 would include cigarettes. So there is a slight change, no? If we're going to go into the last two slides, there is a slight change in terms of the consumption behavior during the peak of COVID-19, vis-a-vis 2 to 3 months after COVID-19. One is some FMCG products are gaining more users or purchases because the economy is opening up. No? People are, not the economy, but people are going outside already as compared to March. The second one is that the purchase of the COVID-19 personal products are declining because they are not as worried as in March or during March. Okay, let's talk on the product categories that are being bought less by the consumers. So this one, in the upper part of the slide, if you see a positive number, so that means that these product categories are recovering in terms of purchases. If you see a negative number or green color, that means that these product categories have further less purchases. So the interesting thing in here is that which product categories are able to recover in wave 2. And this includes beer, liquor or wine, then biscuits, as well as carbonated drinks and meat. So that means that even if people are buying less of these products, at least the magnitude or the magnitude of this, the number of these people are much lesser as compared to the March period.
It's interesting in particular that, because I would have normally put the liquors and cigarettes almost in the same category of products that you could do without during COVID. But interesting to see here the difference that beer and wine are seeming to recover already, but cigarettes really do seem to have been hit particularly hard. Was there any particular reason you saw this?
Yeah. I think that the reason for that one, Tom, is that the beer and the alcoholic drinks are particularly affected so much in a greater magnitude during March as compared to a cigarette. So the recovery rate of the alcoholic drinks are much better as compared to cigarettes. So I think that's the explanation for that.
I see. Okay, interesting.
And then the other products that are also able to recover in wave 2 of the study would include the processed meat, the instant noodles, as well as the infant milk formula. So there's already signs of some product categories which are able to recover, and that's good news to some of the products. So there is a challenge for the other product categories on how to recover during the second half of the year. If we still continue with this kind of no peak period of COVID cases in Cambodia.
One of the questions I think we might just be able to address now actually was from Jim Zemke. We had a question of, do you think to some extent for some of these products the people were buying less in wave 2 than wave 1 because they overstocked during wave 1, because they went through the panic purchases in wave 1?
That could be a reason also. But that's the limitation of this research, because this is an online research. So we cannot really ask a lot of questions about how much did they buy during wave 1 and wave 2, because there's too many categories that we had included in this research. But then again, I think the possible reason why some product categories are not yet recovering in wave 2 is because people were stacking up those products in their pantries. Let me say so.
The interesting next step of the study.
Yes. Okay, so we are done with the product and consumption behavior changes. Now we'll go into the shifting on the social behavior. So similar to the purchase power index, we have this behavior power index. So again, we have nominated 30 activities of people. And again, we have thought about a wider perspective on these personal activities. And we have put across questions to the respondents on how many of these activities did they do during wave 1 and wave 2. And whether they did those activities more, less, or the same from February vis-a-vis March for wave 1 and May versus March for wave 2. So we have two indices, the behavior incidence index, as well as the behavior frequency perception index, and we combine the two to come up with the ranking of the different activities. Okay, Same thing as earlier. So we have the green as well as the red. So the green one would be the activities that have been done more during COVID-19, and the ones in red are the activities that were done lesser during this time. So the activities that have an increasing behavior power would include activities that involve digital or online. For example, food delivery via online channel, online shopping, using of mobile data, using of digital payments. They also have no emergency fund or money during wave one, which is again understandable because of the fear that the Cambodians had in March. On the flip side, the activities that decline are those activities that includes out of home actions, no? If you may say so. Or like for example, local travel, shopping for clothes, eating out, going to the parks as well as the tourist areas, and even transportation, riding Grab as well as riding tuk-tuk, especially in wave two. And the possible reason why riding public transportation decline in wave two is because people are already using their own personal transportation. As compared to wave one, wherein most people here are staying at home and hence there's no public transportation. So that's the explanation why we have this shift on public transportation. Yeah. All right. This one would be the behavior power index of the personal activities and habits that are being done more. Again, on the upper part of the activities, so we have the ones in red. These are the activities that are being done lesser, and then the ones in green are the activities that are being done with a better number of incidents. So the activities that are gaining in terms of incidents would include the food delivery by phone, as well as online shopping, and then phone top-ups via traditional groceries, and doing off-net calls. So since in wave two, people are already going out, so there are some activities that are being done to a higher incidence, which are usually the normal habits of Cambodians, like topping up in the traditional groceries. And then some other activities that have gained a lot would include connection to home Wi-Fi, as well as having food delivery by online means. What is surprising here is that the food delivery has gone up in terms of frequency, as well as in terms of incidents of doing in wave two of the study. So I guess the Phnom residents are shifting their supposedly out of home consumption to an in-home consumption, but buying food from the food delivery apps.
See, so this has potentially been a good time for the Niam 24s, your Phnom Penhs, because that is really a huge increase compared to the others. Maybe this is the acceleration of the trends that we were seeing just beforehand. But I'm quite surprised to see the jump between wave one and wave two on that, or just the extent of that jump.
That's exactly, that's like only 3 months, but again, the shift or the big jump is so high. And our personal thinking in there is that Cambodians were forced, or the Phnom Penh residents were forced to do some stuff that they're not used to do during March. So it's like a massive change. The COVID-19 is a massive change in terms of the behavior. And one thing is that since they're going digital already in March, I think even Grab Food and Yum were so active on social media during that time. So people will become aware of it, and they have tried it, and they're getting used to it right now.
I see.
I think that's the story of it. And then let's go to the personal activities that are being done less by the Phnom Penh residents. and we'll take a look at the activities that are still being done less. So that includes doing local travel, going to the wet market, and then doing top-ups via traditional groceries, and even sending out the on-net SMS. The local travel still, traveling in outside of Phnom Penh is being hit hard, both local as well as international. But we're going to expect that in August, in this month, and during the other 2 long holidays of Cambodia, in the second of the year, local travel would recover. And the other activities that are not yet recovering would include international travel, connecting to a free Wi-Fi, and even the home Wi-Fi. And for this one, for the home Wi-Fi, the main reason for that one is that people are already going outside for work. So the working population are going to the offices, to their work already, and hence the incidence of the people who are connecting to the home Wi-Fi is much lesser as compared to the wave one. We have added also some slides with regards to online food delivery because we have talked about the increasing number of people who are doing online food delivery. So we asked the consumers whether they're aware of the different food services, that's dine-in or stay here, take away, even drive-through, and as well as the phone delivery also. So only 26% of people, or that's 45 people out of 234 respondents, are aware of food delivery. But amongst them, there's like around half of people are doing food delivery, which is like around 9% incidence rate. So 9% of the Phnom Penh residents are doing online food delivery. And it's more true amongst females, it's more true amongst the younger population, the 16 to 29 years old, and the upper income class.
Okay, so even though the amount of people ordering food online has increased, still the number of the actual percentage that they represent of the overall population is relatively low still.
That's true, but remember, it started with 0.
Yes, of course.
But in the span of like around 3 to 4 months, these numbers already got up to 9%.
Okay, yeah. I would have thought it would have been higher than that, but interesting to see.
It's interesting to see in the next few months whether this trend of an increasing number of people going online for the food delivery will be still going up, or it will plateau to a certain number. And then we also asked them, the brands that they have the food delivery, and Yum 24 takes the bow as the ultimate #1 food delivery app here in Phnom Penh, and followed by Food Panda. And they're doing the online food delivery at least 3 times per month.
Just before we move on, actually, we've had 2 questions related to the sample that I think we can just address very quickly here. The first was the survey sample, is it just Cambodians, or was it a mixture of Cambodians and expats? And secondly, was the sample taken just from Phnom Penh or from other areas of Cambodia?
Okay, good questions. Okay, the first answer to the question would be, we did the study in Khmer language. So we think that the respondents of this survey would be Cambodians. Okay, and the answer to the second question is that we did the study in Phnom Penh only. So this research would be for Phnom Penh residents only.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And then we have some questions also about online shopping. And for Cambodia, for the Phnom Penh residents, 3/4 of them are still doing shopping for clothing as well as shoes through the brick and mortar stores. But 47% of them have done online shopping already. And this is true for the 16 to 29 years old, the young population, as well as the upper income class. And in terms of the products that are doing the online shopping, so it's have the t-shirts as well as the makeups, as well as the clothings also. And the average amount of spending would be $31.25. As I said earlier, electronic gadgets, they're shying away from it because they don't want to spend more than this in terms of online shopping.
Okay, so trust is increasing to buy online items for the lower ticket items, but for the big tickets, those haven't benefited quite so much. So
That's true. That's true. And where do they buy their online goods? So it's mainly Facebook, and to some extent, Yum24, and Xandu also. Okay, so we're going to have the last part of the presentation, which will be the learnings and implications. So there are three key things that I would like to talk about. The first one is that we know this one coming from the previous slides that the Phnom Penh residents are embracing the new normal of doing things. But no, the Phnom Penh residents are combining digital lifestyle with the normal tasks, except the out-of-home consumption for now. But again, I would think that in August, as well as during Chomben and Water Festival, the out-of-home activities would increase significantly. So the possible implication for this one would be digital, that includes social media, should always be part of the communication touchpoint mix of the brands. We have this 2017 research for Indochina research wherein we have identified that to have a better reach to the consumers here in Cambodia, we should be doing, the brands should be doing both traditional TV and digital, and to some extent billboard. Now with the findings that we have with the new normal, it seems like digital would become a major player already in terms of reaching more people. The other thing is that since food delivery is becoming a big product that the Phnom Penh residents are consuming right now, it's becoming a small moment of truth already. So perhaps the different brands should be considering this as part of the purchase channel mix as well as a platform for communication material. What I mean to say is that they can advertise, they can put some banner advertising on Yum24 or even Food Panda or etc. So outside of the digital social media as a platform, the food delivery also is one way to reach the consumers.
okay.
The second learning that we would like to discuss is that in terms of the behavior of the Phnom Penh residents on COVID-19, they're still worried, but not as much as compared to March. So that's a truth right now. And then social distancing is not really a big thing here in Phnom Penh. So in terms of implications, so perhaps the HoReCa sector as well as the retail stores can help the government to make the Phnom Penh residents to practice social distancing in their places. Because we know that social distancing works in terms of controlling COVID-19, but here in Cambodia it's not being practiced because people are doing something else. But to help the government also in terms of educating the Phnom Penh residents on the importance of social distancing. So perhaps the HoReCa sector and the retail stores also would help to communicate this to the consumers. The third point is that there are changes in terms of the product consumption of the Cambodians. In the previous slides, we know that the pharmaceutical companies as well as the telco companies are the biggest winners of COVID-19. while the alcoholic products are are the main losers in terms of purchase frequency and purchase incidents. And the other thing is that there's already some shift or some recoveries in terms of purchase power for some of the product categories like baby products, milk formula, baby foods, as well as bottled water, coffee, ready-to-drink juice, as well as the bread, and to some extent electronic gadgets. So possible implications for this one would be perhaps not the in-home consumption occasion should be the focus of the brands when it comes to communication, because out-of-home consumption right now is declining. The other thing is that it's very crucial for the different brands with regards to the recovery of the purchase power would be the 3 long holidays of Cambodia in the second half of the year. So the promotions would definitely help them to recover. The other thing is that even if we are in this COVID thing for Cambodia, for Phnom Penh, we should not forget that we should still be doing some activities to build and sustain brand equity and brand loyalty to the consumers, because that's where the relationship would come in between the consumers as well as the brands. And the other opportunity that we can talk about is that the first one would be to tap the nationalistic angle. We know that Cambodians, the Khamais, have strong are patriotic because of the education system. So showing the brand as a brand that cares for the country by providing help to the government can be a good thing for brand equity. The other thing is that we can delve into a health messaging, wherein we can show the brand that the brand cares for the health of the Cambodians. So we can the different brands can also consider this kind of messaging. Right.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, Francis, thank you so much for that presentation. Actually, I know that I myself learned a lot from that research. For everybody on the call, we'll now start the Q&A. So for any questions that you still have, please type them into the chat box now. One question I can ask straight away is related to the electronic payments apps. One of the payment platforms, I suppose with the increase in online payments and online purchases, one would assume that the use of Pay and other electronic payment channels would have increased. Did your research suggest this?
Okay, that's a good question. What we had, we didn't show this one, this finding in the study. We also asked the payment mode for the online shopping as well as the food delivery. And what we had found out in that research is that the Phnom Penh residents are still paying in cash. So I think cash is still the king here in Phnom Penh. The magnitude of the increase of the electronic payments, it may have, it may have some increase, but not significant increase, as with the increase in the online shopping and digital shopping also.
Okay, interesting. So I'm a little bit surprised that almost. I thought that those would have had their uptake as well, but still cash remains king. So that actually leads on nicely to another one. So a number of the trends you spoke about, increase in NAM24, Your Phnom Penh, Cambodians for the first time almost being forced to use these apps that maybe they wouldn't have used before. From what your research suggests, do you think that this is just a temporary boost during COVID, or do you and people will return to previous habits afterwards, or do you think this is a momentous shift that will continue even if there is in the hoped for situation, a full recovery, economic recovery after COVID-19?
Yeah, that's another question. Good question, Tom. In terms of the longevity of this shift to the digital ways of doing shopping. My take in there is that it will continue, but the increase or the growth rate of the digital shift may slow down, especially that if we continue with the current situation of COVID-19 in Cambodia, wherein the fear is not really as much as compared to what we had in March. What the good thing that COVID brought here in Cambodia is that it paved the way for new things to be done with the Cambodians. So there is a force, Cambodians are forced to do additional habits that they need to do or consider. And one of that one would be the food delivery apps as well as the slight shift to the digital platforms. Well, it can also be a challenge to Young 24, even to Food Panda also, on how they will make themselves still relevant to the consumers. So any marketing ploy that they would be doing that will further increase the penetration as well as the frequency of using these food delivery apps would be up to the food delivery app companies. But the good thing about for Cambodians is that Cambodia consumers are more of like, it's not really, you say so, no? Cambodia as a market is not yet into a consumer-driven market, but no, it's more of a manufacturer-driven market. So whatever brands and manufacturers would tell the consumers in terms of the brands, as long as the messaging, the communication are relevant, incredible, and to some extent unique, and coupled with a good word of mouth from friends, from colleagues, from the family members, then there's a strong chance that these product categories or these brands would have a good sales here in Cambodia.
Okay.
And we have learned that one in the past 3 to 5 years of doing research here in Cambodia.
Okay, that's really interesting. So manufacturing-driven market, not consumer-driven market yet, but that trend looks to be on its way. So actually, semi-linked to that question, we had one question from Laurent Mathieu. Actually, you answered that one. We had one question about how, if the market is manufacturing-driven, if it is revenue location-driven, we did see in your research that social distancing was really not seen as an effective measure by many people. What can hotels, restaurants, bars, what can these institutions do to, I suppose, promote that message a bit better without affecting their revenue? I know it's quite a tricky question, but how can they, what message can they give to, I suppose, promote social distancing whilst also encouraging people to come to their businesses still?
Okay. That's also a very interesting question. I think that the HoReCa sector, what they can do is that to survive, I would say survive this COVID-19. Because we don't know yet how long will it take in terms of the finish or the ending of this one. They have, if they still don't have a partnership with the food delivery apps, then perhaps they can go into that platform also, because as I said earlier, 9% of the Phnom residents are doing food delivery through the applications. In terms of the social distancing, we can take a look at what the learnings in the other markets, wherein the message is that they can have people on site in the restaurants, in the hotels, but then again, there's the health messaging that will come into play, that this hotel is safe for COVID-19 because we're doing this protection to ensure the health of the audience or of the target market. So that will make people feel comfortable in going to those restaurants and hotels. And the other thing, I guess, is that if the hotels, and even the restaurants can also partner with the government, with the MOH in terms of accreditation with regards to that this is COVID-19 free establishment, then perhaps that kind of messaging can be portrayed to the consumers that we are doing business, but we are also taking care of the health of the patrons.
Okay, and that's very interesting. And I think actually I can also give the EuroCham perspective from that as well. So the kind of delivering the health message, and also the message that you are adapting to COVID-19. I know from EuroCham's perspective, when we've been organizing our events, a number of the hotels that we typically work with have been very accommodating into helping us with larger rooms, spacing participants out a bit more, ensuring that they will provide face masks, sanitizers, and the rest of the normal equipment. So that's what we've seen. So actually, one I think that's a particularly good question. I'm actually going to try and join the two questions together. What I also saw in your research was just how important Facebook is as an online sales platform. And so I want to join the two questions together. So Facebook still remains an important platform. First of all, what are the other online shopping platforms that have seen an uptake during COVID-19? And with such an importance on Facebook, how important are social media influencers in promoting product sales?
Okay. All right. Okay. I'll try to answer those questions. Tom.
There's a few there, right?
Okay. Those are big questions. Okay. Yes. I would agree that Facebook is together with YouTube, would be the top social media platforms here in Cambodia. I think in terms of number, Cambodia has a 16 million population. 51%, or that's like around 8.2 million, are social media active users. So there's a big group already, and still increasing, because the young ones are going into the social media platform also. So it's an important platform, so we should not be forgetting that one. The Facebook and the YouTube, in terms of advertising, in terms of reach, in terms of messaging, it's an important thing to do for the marketing people, for the advertising people. In terms of the other online shopping websites that have gone that are doing well during COVID-19, we are not seeing that in the research, primarily because I think they are working in smaller numbers, and then Facebook is just like overcrowding them. And remember, in March, to some extent in April, people were here, at least in Phnom Penh, people were at home and they're doing most of they're spending most of their time watching videos, doing Facebooking, and there's a lot of eyeballs, as well as a lot of time on that one. So in terms of the airing time of the different brands, you have a lot of chance to reach out to the consumers. The other thing in Cambodia, which is partly slightly unique, is that you have these online sellers who are doing Facebook Live and showing their products, and then some of them actually have some promotions also. So that's a big hit also, and it's in Facebook platform. And the Facebook post also, I'm seeing it in the Facebook feed, that there's a lot of online sellers here in Cambodia. And I understand that one, because the brick and mortar retail stores were closed, not really closed, but they were affected in terms of their sales, in terms of their audience during the March and April period. So they have to resort also to the social media platform to sell their products. Okay. So my message there is that for us to reach the consumers in Cambodia, don't forget about Facebook and YouTube. If you want to go to rural, add it up with traditional TV as well as radio, and then couple with the billboard, because billboard is also a big thing, especially here in Phnom Penh.
Okay, so those digital marketing trends much more increasing a lot faster in the cities than the provincial areas. Okay, so we're now at the end of the Q&A. We just have a couple of minutes left. One question that I'm very interested in here, and this will be the last question before we close, is just Will this, so we see here you have phase 1, phase 2, wave 1, wave 2. Will you continue the study for wave 3, wave 4, and will that be publicly available? I know you mentioned that this is a self-funded study.
We'll do wave 3 and possibly wave 4 also, because the idea here is to track the changes of the consumers until such a time that, but it's a question in my head whether the normal that we used to know before March would go back sometime this year or next year. So that's one thing that we are trying to figure out, whether there's like some shift on the behavior of the non-prime residents in terms of their purchases and which product categories are affected by it. We're doing retail audit, not a syndicated retail audit, the market share, the volume, the value, and this we're using also as some contextualization of the findings of our retail audit here in Cambodia. So to answer the question, yes, we'll continue this one as frequently as we can.
Perfect. Okay, well, with that then, that will bring the end to the webinar. I just want to say, Francis, thank you so much for coming here today and sharing this research. I know that there's, as I said before, there really isn't a lot out there. And this is certainly the first primary research I've seen that's really shown the winners and the losers of COVID-19, as well as give some implications for what it means to companies out there at the moment. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to Francis. Thank you very much to all of our participants for the active discussion. We had around 40 or maximum live at the top of here. And also to the unsung heroes of these webinars, which is the EuroCham production team. So Guillaume Maltaverne, Champa Sov, who helped make this happen. So Francis, thank you. And participants, thank you very much. And with that, we hope to see you at the next EuroCham webinar. And yes, the email will be sent with the presentation and the YouTube link. So thank you very much, everybody, and see you at the next one. Goodbye.